Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, this is my space for exploring ideas of creativity and the arts, and also some very simple psychology, sort of self-care and mental health tips, because I find that the two intersect in very fun and fascinating ways. Today, I'm breaking down this idea of sensitivity. So what it is to be particularly sensitive, how you can tell whether or not you are an especially sensitive person, why it's a good thing and the benefits to sensitivity, including being creative, and how you can better manage it if you feel like you're one of these people who's commonly overwhelmed by their feelings or their emotions or the world around them. So let's get into it. So the word sensitive comes from the Latin root sentire, and it means to feel. So literally, if you're a sensitive person, it simply means you feel a lot of things. So this means your own emotions. You might have very strong feelings about things. It also can mean about the physical world around you. You may be very aware of your surroundings and the physical data that you're taking in throughout the day as well. Signs, you may be a very sensitive person. If you're very emotional, right? If you cry very easily at movies, you feel like your emotions go up and down very quickly. You take things in a really deep, kind of strong way. Likely a sign that you're sensitive. Sensitive people tend to be conflict averse, and this makes sense because if you're having a difficult conversation with someone, you're not only going to be aware of your own feelings, right, and hoping that nothing bad happens that causes you pain, but also aware of the other person's feelings and not wanting them to feel awkward or uncomfortable because you'll probably feel that as well. So you're having a hard time feeling for both people, and that can make it really hard to face conflicts or have difficult conversations. They also tend to have a hard time taking criticism because everything feels really personal and you're just going to feel any correction in a really strong way. So they tend to have a hard time with criticism. Another sign of potentially being particularly sensitive is if you are very generous, you empathize easily, and you have a tendency to take care of others. Because sensitive people are so empathetic, they tend to feel other people's feelings very strongly, and they can't stand to see other people in pain. So they're generally pretty ready and willing to jump in and help to try and make situations better so that other people are happier, which is great. It's easy for highly sensitive people to feel a little bit different or alone, like that other people don't understand them or don't think the same way they do. And this is particularly true if you happen to be a very sensitive man, because societal roles being what they are, we're not used to thinking of men as being really sensitive. The idea of kind of knuckling down and pushing through things, it makes it harder and particularly isolating for a sensitive man. Sensitive people tend to be very aware of their physical surroundings, very tuned in to the things that they're seeing and hearing. They tend to effortlessly take in more details than some less sensitive people might. They also tend to easily overthink and worry. If you have like this deep, kind of vibrant inner life, it's easy to get really focused there and then spin off worrying about details of what people said or overthinking problems and things that could happen in the future. It can be hard a little bit to get sensitive people out of their heads and to take action and just be present in the reality in front of them rather than living in this interior world. They also tend to be very intuitive. So if you've had experiences feeling like you already know what another person is feeling or thinking before they've told you, it might be because you're very sensitive. You probably are taking in lots of very minute, subtle details about the way they're speaking or presenting themselves and drawing a correct conclusion about what they're actually thinking or feeling. It's not the same as mind reading. Kind of feels like that sometimes. But if you feel like you're very intuitive and you tend to understand other people pretty well, might be a sign that you're very sensitive. And finally, you may also be sensitive if you are easily tired or overwhelmed. I have a video here on Myers-Briggs, different personality types. The odds are good that if you're highly sensitive, you are an introvert, because if you're taking in a ton of information all the time, you need to go off by yourself to unpack it and kind of understand and just take a break. And there is not a thing wrong with that. Very useful to know about yourself. But if you find that you're commonly overwhelmed with stimulus and you just need a break, you might be particularly sensitive. Okay, so then what are the benefits to this? Why is it a good thing? Because it's kind of easy if you are a sensitive person to feel the negatives. I think it's easy for most people to feel what's wrong with their own personality type. But if you feel like, gosh, I'm always overwhelmed, I can't handle the simple demands of life that other people can easily handle, How is this a good thing? Well, there are many ways that it's a good thing. As mentioned before, sensitive people tend to be very empathetic and kind. We really need them in society. Everyone is capable, and I think very ready and willing to be kind and charitable to the people they care about, like the small circle in their lives. Sensitive people are more likely to care a bit about everyone, which is also why it can be kind of exhausting and why it's important to learn how to set proper boundaries. But it's a good thing. You want people who will look at any person that others might be ready to disregard or not speak to, who wants to open up to them, who wants to figure out, who is this person? Why are you interesting? I know you're important, right? You have feelings like mine. It creates kind of a natural bridge and connection to understanding and caring about other people, which is very much a positive. Having very strong experiences also lends itself absolutely to being naturally creative. It's not a coincidence that most of the brilliant artists in the world struggled with depression or having too many feelings, having a really hard time with that. Not to say that if you're sensitive, you're doomed to be depressed. But there is a fascinating correlation there that I would love to study. But it makes sense because creativity, and I've mentioned this in a few other videos, it's essentially the ability to find or create dots, so ideas, if you will, and then connect them in new ways. So you're just making new connections. That's how creativity works. If you're very sensitive and you're taking in a ton of information, you have more dots to work with. That's pretty much how it works. Really sensitive people are naturally inclined to be more creative. And if you feel like you are a sensitive person and you haven't explored a creative outlet, highly encourage. It's not only that you might be good at it, you might really be good at it. You'll have to build up a skill if you don't have a skill there, but it will probably provide a really helpful outlet. It's important for sensitive people to get the swirl of emotions out because they can kind of get stuck and that causes a problem. So they tend to be very creative, which is obviously a benefit. It's also worth acknowledging, it's easy to feel like, oh, it's such a bad thing to be more aware of the pain you're feeling in daily life. But sensitive people also feel joy more easily. They can tap into the range of emotions more readily, not just the negative ones. I know for myself, I am a pretty sensitive person. I don't meet every one of the bullet points mentioned above, but I meet most of them. And I'm used to having a ton of feelings that I don't quite understand and learning how to deal with that. And one of the things I've found about myself is I love going out in nature, going for a walk or something, and just getting really hooked into the little details. I will see a flower growing in the sidewalk and feel such joy about it. I'm like, that is so beautiful and sweet, and look at these details, and I can get really pulled into it, and it makes me super happy. And it's something that a lot of people probably wouldn't notice. If you feel like you're a very sensitive person, be aware that there's a lot there to be grateful for, and it's worth seeking out the details and the elements that will bring you joy too, because you can feel those very acutely as well. Another real benefit actually is that being sensitive encourages habits of self-care, because you're probably already aware that your threshold for stress and anxiety is maybe a little lower than other people's. You have to take care of yourself. I know for myself, I can push through a really stressful time, especially if it's emotional or it has to do with relationships. I can't handle it for long. I can handle it for a couple days, and then if I don't do something to fix it or to find an outlet or to deal with my emotions, I will have a meltdown. That's what's going to happen. My life will not continue to be productive. I know some people can kind of knuckle down and push through for a super long time. I can't do that. The benefit there being that it really forces me to learn how to take care of myself and how to navigate my relationships and my life circumstances in a manner that's going to be healthy, is going to limit my anxiety. So it's really good. It's actually forcing habits that other people don't necessarily have to learn, at least not as quickly. But at the end of the day, they're just important life lessons for all humans. You're just maybe pushed to learn them a little bit more quickly. And that's a good thing. And then finally, it's a little easier. It's not a given, but it's generally easier for sensitive people to embrace new ideas and be a little open-minded. Because again, this idea of being really empathetic, if you tend easily to feel another person's feelings, that just gives you a little bridge to be curious about the way they think and look at the world as well. Because if you realize that someone has the same feeling as you about a very different idea, you might be interested in that. It just gives you a connection. So again, open-mindedness is a skill. Anyone can and should practice it, but it's often a little bit easier if you're very sensitive. You might have an advantage there. It's a little easier for you to understand another person's perspective, and that is a beautiful thing. Okay, so moving on to methods for managing if you feel highly sensitive. What are ways you can make your life a little bit easier? So we can break this down into sort of general categories. And the first one being we want to, as much as we can, have some say in what information we're taking in throughout our days. That means we need to be really good at setting boundaries. This is so critical. Again, important for all people, but less sensitive people tend to be better at it. Being conflict averse makes it really, really hard to be clear with people about what you need from them, what's not okay, what's causing you stress and anxiety. It can be just difficult to have those conversations. So it's easy for very sensitive people to be taken advantage of because, again, they've got this really empathetic, caring tendency. So they tend to jump into wanting to help people and assuming the best about them. So when you find someone who is not as equally empathetic and caring as you, sometimes they'll just pull you along and see what they can get from you, and it's really not okay. And that can happen in really big ways or really little ways. I have a video here on manipulation that digs more into that if you're curious. But the main thing is just to understand how to have those conversations, because another mistake that sensitive people can have out of a desire to avoid conflict is to let something simmer for a super long time that the other person has absolutely no idea is a problem. They will just never talk about it, so the problem is getting worse for the sensitive person here who hasn't said a thing. And then eventually it boils over and they decide to just cut off the relationship. They're like, I can't even talk to you anymore because I'm so upset about this thing that I never told you about. And that's not fair. So it's a balance. It depends on your circumstance and what you're dealing with. But as a rule, it's super helpful for sensitive people to learn to set boundaries and just be clear with people. And that's just a skill that can be practiced. And it's kind of hard, but it makes a really big difference, because if you can cut out the toxic or the really harmful or just stressful elements in your life that don't need to be there, then you're giving yourself room and permission to have so much more energy and joy and to share the beautiful insights and perspectives you have in a way that will really go out into the world. It's a real pity and a common thing for these sensitive, insightful people to let their time be sucked away in an area that is not actually needed or helpful, because they don't know how to set the boundaries. And so then they're not sharing what they have in a big way, because all their energy is going to this useless or at least not healthy relationship. It's really important to see if you can learn to set those boundaries and really be able to channel the beautiful insight you have into a healthy, open space that's going to give you joy. So that's the first idea, is this notion of trying to mitigate what information you're taking in all the time, because we take in so much. Then the next one is the perspective on being sensitive, and hopefully the whole list of benefits has helped, but being sensitive is a good thing. It's kind of easy to feel like it's really a negative and beat yourself up over it and wish that we were different than we are. And it's true for all people of any personality type. But we want to focus on the benefits. If we see our nature as a gift, so much easier to go out into the world with joy and positivity and not feel as overwhelmed by existing in our own skin, right? That just compounds the difficulties when we're frustrated by the way we are. If we can find some joy in understanding how we're made, and then that's really much better. Along with that, an important skill is to try and practice being as kind to yourself as you probably are to other people. If we can take a step back and imagine that we are a friend in a similar circumstance, what would we say to ourselves, right? The odds are good that if you had a friend who was feeling really stressed and really maxed out for some reason, you would go to them and tell them to take a break and do whatever they needed to take care of themselves and not to worry about whatever stressors were piling up on them. And that's so good. That's a good response. If we can treat ourselves like we would treat a friend, we'll have a lot more grace and forgiveness and take better care of ourselves and appreciate who we are, and we'll get along with ourselves better. It's kind of a funny thing to say, but it's true. We really need to be on good terms with ourselves. The third one is then learning to manage and sift all of the data you're taking in. Because no matter what, even if you have all your relationships are really in order, your work is really great, Even so, you're just going to be taking in a lot, and life is exciting and new, and no one knows what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. There's a lot to understand about life all the time. And if you're very sensitive, you've just got a lot of data all the time, and it can get really overwhelming. So, some practices that can help deal with that. It's really good to have a habit of getting out of your head. You probably spend too much time there. Exercise. Ooh, that's a big one for so many reasons. Oh my gosh. So many reasons to exercise, but it really will help get out of your head. Going outside. Ooh, that's great. Go for a walk. Changing environments in general, sometime throughout the day, can be really helpful. A lot of times, what we need to do is calm down and relax, and our brains will do a lot of work for us once there's time and there's space. If we're really stressed and maxed out all the time, we're not gonna sift through and understand what's going on. So we need to take a break. So anything to practice mindfulness and sort of staying in the present moment. I have a video on that here if you're interested. Meditation or prayer as like a daily habit. Journaling can be so good. Get the ideas out. Creative outlets. So maybe you need to just paint sometimes, or you need to dance. Try and find something creative you can do. That's often really helpful. And then, of course, sharing your feelings. And that's part of where the creativity comes from. A lot of times, we're taking our feelings and we're putting them out on paper, or we're putting them out into a song or something like that. You can also just have a conversation with another human about all the things you're feeling. That's so good if you have a friend or family member in your life that you can open up to. Or even if you do and you're just struggling with understanding yourself or the way your thoughts work, counseling is such a good thing. I'm really glad the stigma around it is going away. My dad is a counselor, my sister-in-law is a counselor. We just have it really around in the family, so I'm very used to it, and not everyone is, and it's so good. Just a person who is literally trained to help you understand your mind and your thoughts and help you pick apart some unhealthy patterns, and most of us have a few. It's really great. So I highly recommend, if you've never been, try and find somebody who kind of clicks with you that's so healthy. And I think that's about it. So again, those categories are: control some of the data that's coming in, cut out whatever's unhealthy as much as you can, have a better understanding and appreciation for yourself and how you're made, and try not to get down on yourself for being sensitive. And then what are some habits, some just healthy daily things you can incorporate that will make it easier for you to understand and work through all of the data you're taking in. I hope this has been helpful for you. That's all I have for today. If you have any thoughts or questions, I'm always really interested to hear what people have to say. Drop me a comment. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and give this a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.